Thanks everyone for tuning in to my channel. This is Donna Makita Bradley with the Book of Makita 411. So, what are we going to talk about today? So much going on in the world. So let's chat.
Hello, welcome. Coming back again to tune in. Oh, I love it. Thanks for tuning in. So today I'm going to get right into it. I was talking to someone very dear to me. I have a son, and we have great, wonderful, in-depth conversations because he's a musician and I'm an artist, so we very well gel. So we were talking about the whole concept of how things are no longer pure. Like the whole way we look at the world today and its impurity. And even from the political aspect of it with the slogan of Make America Great Again. When you look at that slogan of Making America Great Again, one of the things you could think about when you separate it from what it's attached to in a negative context is how we as Americans, it's a very diverse country with many different races, you know, um, and the point is, it's if we are going to make things great again, it pretty much is on the basis of standards. So we talked about that. And sometimes that's what we see in the breakdown in society, where there is no longer standards. Like pretty much, I don't know, maybe from the generation of my son and I, and the generation above me, thinks that we see the world today as a lack of morals and a lack of values. And those are the things that you kind of define purity, like what is pure, what is uh, a framework that we can look at and say, well, that's what we strive to be, the best. Because when you try to be the best in a standard, that's usually where you're most successful. And even if you look at it in the breakdown in society, in parenting, if you are a parent who was strict, or if you were raised by parents who were strict, there was a sense of standards where you had to do things a certain way in order to complete a project. It wasn't a choice like it is today. Today, there is a lot of this feeling of, and this is my opinion, but can be backed up by research that psychologists have noticed that there is a lack of, people trying to be their best. 1969, there was I think a book written in 1969, I'm not quite sure if that's the exact date, but it was the Peter Principle. And it was about how, like, even in management, you only work to a certain level. You'll never reach the on that level because the general population doesn't expect you to. Like, there's no expectation anymore of the higher standard. Even as an artist and in art history, starting with the Renaissance period and how there was a standard in art and how, you weren't considered an artist unless you could draw by proportion and you could make an artwork that basically dealt with religion or political satire or whatever was going on in the world at that time as far as sociology. But then the artists did rebel. They were like, this shouldn't be. We should not have to have a standard to say we're artists, to do what we want to do as artists. And then that movement, it did take off to incorporate a lot of other things in society and how maybe things did not necessarily have to have a standard anymore. I mean, part two of this video will be where hopefully I'll get someone to speak about this, which is my son who's a musician, and he's going to speak on how he sees the view of the breakdown of standards and the whole idea of keeping things pure. That's what I think, if I go back to the slogan, because I know it kind of went all over the place, but the slogan of make America great again could have been a great slogan if it had have incorporated the whole diversity of being American. But the problem is it was so attached to a supremacy that degrades others, and so therefore the standard doesn't fit in a general population. And if it doesn't fit in a general population, the only other thing that does fit is a generalization that you don't have to reach a certain standard. Like it's okay to just be ordinary, and it's okay to feel you're privileged, and you don't have to do certain things. Pretty much it's, I've heard terminology of, calling it dumbing down. And, if you look at the dumbing down of America by design, that's an article written August 2014 by Jaquim Haka Pion. Sorry if I'm misspelling you guys or mispronouncing your words. I mean, mispronouncing your names. But anyway, it says the most obvious example of how Americans have been dumbed down is through this nation's failed public education system and being just even, I will say, where I don't have to look at the standards of math and science, but as an art teacher, I've seen that. At one time, not that long ago, America reigned supreme as a leading model for the rest of the world, providing the best quality free public K-12 education system on the planet. But over the last many decades, while much of the rest of the world has been passing us by, it seems an insidious federal agenda has been implemented to condition and brainwash a population of mindless, robotic, systemary that simply does what is told, and of course, the brainwashing commences early in American schools. Now, that's one article that kind of touches on that whole thing about standards. I mean, there was a time where, even if you look at, if you're a martial art lover, you like karate, you see the rituals that you have to do to become the best. It's the same as my son was saying as a musician. I mean, today music is just pretty much sampled. There's not a lot of real composition and writing and what it takes to figure out the science of sound and the mathematics of beat and things like that. It's not really that necessary today because you can just sample some music and just do a repetitious sound or a repetitious quote, and now you got millions of dollars. So the whole thing about making America great again was pretty much could have been more about let's get back to the purity. And if you want to look at it as a racial thing, let's look at how if you don't look at getting back to what is pure and a standard, especially in African American culture. We spoke about that, how, when we're raised, like I was raised with parents that had very high standards, and most people my age probably have. And those who didn't, it's not to judge, but they didn't get a sense of what they needed to be successful. Because you cannot just do mediocre, because the world's going to already look at you like that. You're already pretty much going to be degraded as a minority because there's a certain standard of what is best. And usually, what is the standard of what is best doesn't represent truly a whole minority. You know what I'm saying? It's a certain standard where you have to be successful. And so, when you were raised with parents who were strict and had, you had standards that, certain things you had to do. Like you didn't just get a chance to say, oh, well, I don't want to finish it. Or like today, it amazes me when I work with, students, and young, very young, and the first thing that comes out of their mouth is, I don't want to do this. And I'm like, really? You don't want to do this? I mean, I understand that there is going to be those who are opposed to what I'm saying and say where people do need to have choice. And I'm not saying not to have choice, but I'm saying there's a certain standard. So if I come in as a instructor, it's about you learning from what I can teach you at a certain level where you aren't. Not that I'm the best or that I don't have a standard, but I'm teaching you from the level of where you are and to where you could be. And you know, the whole thing where sometimes I get even this, oh, I'm bored. And one time I remember saying to someone, like, well, if you're bored, that's because you're boring. And someone who was young, the millennials, was like, oh, you shouldn't say that, you know, that doesn't mean that. And I mean, you know, entitled to your opinion on that. But the way I look at it is like, well, I'm not here to entertain you, you know? And I think that's what the misconception is now, is that if there is no longer a standard, like you don't have to rise to a certain level to be great or to be pure, because when things aren't pure, it's like ephemeral, it breaks down. So there is a necessity for that if we're going to compete with global economy and with a global world and with everything in life to be successful. So I don't know. I mean, that was a lot to say in a little bit of time, and I just don't want it to be all about my point of view. What do you guys think? I mean, do you see how there's a breakdown today in this idea of what is pure and the higher standard? I mean, when you're at work, do people work as hard as you do, or do they get away with just being lackadaisical and you know, just do whatever they want and you know skip out even if they want to. I mean, I've seen it, I've witnessed it my own self, how, you know, when I work with some of the younger generation that has less of a standard because things have broken down, kind of reminds me of the Robert Merton theory in sociology, the strain theory. But you know, let me know what you guys think. And again, I want to thank all those who have subscribed. I think I have like 5 subscribers, but you guys matter to me because I'm speaking to you, and I'm glad you're tuning in. And anybody else, if you like what I'm saying, just do it. Press like or subscribe, share. You know, send me an email. And like I always say, at the end of the day, make it a great day.